All right, good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Katie Diener, and I am joined with Devin Arneson and Clay Gruber to discuss our Greyhound media assessment. So on July 10th, the movie Greyhound was released on Apple TV. Now, this movie was supposed to be released to the big screen, but due to COVID, it was sent straight to streaming services. Now, Greyhound did not have a production assistance agreement, and that is where our team comes in. Our interest focused on if a PAA makes a difference on the reception of the Navy's message and sentiment towards the service. In order to compare, we also used Midway, which was another World War II movie, but did have a PAA. And then we also used the new Army-centered movie, The Outpost, which also did not have a PAA and was sent straight to streaming services because of COVID-19. In total, our team analyzed 177 articles from print, wire, trade press, and web-based services. We didn't include any internal media like DoD press releases.
But we did include U.S. elite, regional, and metropolitan traditional media sources. We also want to point out that for the articles coded, while keeping in mind the release dates of these movies were just about a month ago, that 58% of the articles for Outposts were published after the release date, and 38% were published after the release date for Greyhound.
Now, for our timeline, we started our analysis when the movie began filming, and we ended our search 2 weeks after the release of the movie for continuity.
We had 6 summary findings that were worth mentioning here. First is that regardless of the tone towards the film, the tone towards the service remained neutral to positive. Second, the primary message for the service in the articles were their contributions to the particular battle. So for the Navy, it was their contributions to Midway and the Battle of the Atlantic. And then for the Army, it was their contributions to the Battle of Kamdesh. Third, the historical figures, particularly for Midway and the Outpost, really helped carry the service's message forward. So Midway and the Outpost, the actors portrayed real life characters, which kind of helped carry the service's message forward for that one. And then particularly under point 4, the character development in the Outpost and the fact that they had multiple veterans playing that were actors within the film helped carry the Outposts and the Army's message forward a little bit more than the other 2 films. And you'll see that in the data coming up. And then 5, the film review versus the message promise. So this is specifically for Midway. So the Midway had more articles that had negative film reviews. However, Midway also had the Navy's message was more prominent in Midway articles. And then last is the Tom Hanks effect. So for Greyhound, you had Tom Hanks was kind of a dual threat. So he was the screenwriter and he was the actor. And oh, by the way, he's Tom Hanks. He's his own brand. So he kind of distracted a lot from the Navy's potential message.
The team examined tone comparing the sentiment towards the movie and the sentiment towards the service. Now, the tone was categorized as either positive, negative, neutral, or no mention. Now, just because, let's say, the Navy or the Army was mentioned doesn't automatically make it positive. For neutral, this may have been a more factual article, like maybe it was just discussing the movie's plot, and then it was put into the neutral category. You can see a large difference in tone between the 3 movies towards service represented. Greyhound had the largest amount of no mentions, meaning there wasn't a tone toward the US Navy in the article. We found actually in a lot of stories about Greyhound that the ship was referred to as a ship leading an Allied fleet and not necessarily a US Navy ship or a Navy ship leading an Allied fleet. There was also a difference in tone between before the movie's release date and after the movie's release date. In all 3 movies, we saw a more positive shift towards the service after the movie's release date. And actually, as you can see here, that before Greyhound was released, there were 0 positive articles in tone towards the Navy before the movie. And then it actually increased 18% positive towards the Navy after the movie was released. Outpost had the highest percentage of positive tone towards the service at 39%, and the movie was at 64%.
The talking points listed are among several from the PAG. Greyhound's plot focused on a convoy of Allied ships that were crossing the Atlantic, but the articles didn't capitalize on the U.S. Navy taking the lead from the support of our partner nations. Since partnership is a common theme in the Navy, it was surprising to only have this message represented in 17% of the articles. And let's not forget about Tom Hanks as a screenwriter. In this case, you certainly can't forget. This talking point took the lead with an overall mention of 61%. Even though he played the lead role as a captain of a US Navy ship, the journalistic news value prominence overshadowed the Navy's messages. Even though a PAA cannot be equated to the prevalence of service-specific talking points, we found that one or more Navy talking points was mentioned in 44% of the Greyhound articles, and Greyhound did not have a PAA, whereas 73% were mentioned in Midway. And then also, the Outpost didn't have a PAA, but Army talking points were mentioned in 85% of those articles. Of note, since the movies were pushed to streaming services due to COVID, this talking point was mentioned in 35% of the Greyhound articles and 15% in the Outpost. For Midway, the most prevalent message was the importance of the Battle of Midway, having a 51% mention. Even though there were prominent actors, like some of you may know, the Jonas Brother and Mandy Moore, playing famous historical naval figures, they didn't overshadow the Navy's message in this case.
So within an article, you're more than likely you're going to have more than one competing message, and that's what we defined as share of voice. So defining the numbers here for you. So we'll use Midway, and they're 71%, for example. So if there's an article that focuses on Midway and it gives a review of the film, and within that article it also talks about the Navy outside of the movie Midway, that's a share of voice for the movie Midway and a share of voice for the Navy. So in 71% of articles about the Navy, the U.S. Navy had some sort of share of voice in that. And then conversely, if you look over at Greyhound, you could also say that in 78% of articles, the Navy did not have a share of voice in Greyhound articles. And then within share of voice, so we get share of voice is kind of big picture, and voices is more scope to see it within each article, who's talking, who's quoted, what are they talking about. So for Greyhound, you can see there's the Tom Hanks effect right there, 58%, and then Apple TV, how they purchased the movie from Sony, got 62%, and the cast and crew were also heavily mentioned as well. And then look over at the Navy voices, these specific ones were only mentioned 1% of the time. That's to say that they were mentioned one time in 82 articles. And then for Midway, you can see Roland Emmerich, he's the director of the film, was mentioned in 3/4 of the articles. And then over on the Navy side, veterans at 17%. Again, this is tied into the historical figures that the actors portrayed. So the message carried a little bit better in Midway. And then in the Outpost, you can see that the first two there, 64%, 88%. The Outpost book and the book's author were mentioned a lot in Outpost articles, and then the cast and crew were mentioned in almost all of the articles. And then kind of along with the cast and crew, you can see the Army voices. So they had veterans playing actors. It was a little bit, the timeline was closer to modern day. So those two particular voices, U.S. soldiers and veterans, had more prominence than the other two films.
So what's the WIFM? What's in it for me? The analysis shows the Navy had a greater share of voice in Midway compared to Greyhound, and the Army in the Outpost. Although there were differences between Midway and Greyhound, we can't come out and say that solely because Greyhound didn't have a PAA. The Outpost didn't have a PAA either, but they still had a higher share of voice. Now, this maybe contributed to the fact that they hired veterans as actors. Maybe it was just more relevant, or maybe it was just more appealing to the journalistic news values at the time. When comparing Midway and Greyhound, the Navy did lose an opportunity to use framing and insert the Navy's message. The lack of attribution contributed to a loss of talking points mentioning the Navy's importance in World War II, or just the importance of the Navy altogether. In order to better understand the Navy's use of agenda building when a service-specific movie is going to get released, a more thorough study is recommended. Variables like whether it was pre and post 9/11 setting, the involvement of veterans, and theater versus streaming services may all play an additional part in how the Navy's message is being heard. The bottom line is that while a PAA may help, it's not the magic bullet to getting your message heard.
So our recommendations going forward, it comes down to two primary things as you feel the need for the next film. The first is that if you can building the agenda for the media and then pitching it in a way that creates that journalistic news value for them. So for example, in a film like Greyhound with no PAA, that focuses on, actions in the Atlantic during the winter. Who's in Sixth Fleet right now, who's just transited through the Atlantic, who's been through the Atlantic in December and January during rough seas, who can talk about, how Tom Hanks, how he talked on the bridge and how that relates to today. It's pretty accurate. And then, can we show the film? Can we get the film to a ship who's currently deployed and have them get in the wardroom, and, pictures of them watching it, interviews after they're done watching the film. And then all that stuff creates an information subsidy for the media. So you've done all the work for them. You've pitched it to them in a way that gives it journalistic news value. You've thrown their big journalistic news value talking point, Mr. Tom Hanks, in there, and said, hey, he speaks really good on the bridge. Here's a current SWO talking about how awesome it was. So all of those things build forward to doing the work for the media and really getting the Navy's message heard a little bit more.
All right, so that's all that we have for you about Greyhound, and I will stop sharing screen so we can take some questions.